The desert sun had barely crested the horizon, yet the battlefield was already alive with motion. Dust swirled across the barren terrain as armored vehicles rumbled past, their engines humming a low, ominous tune. Corporal Maya Thompson checked her rifle for the third time, fingers grazing the cold metal with practiced precision. She was a soldier forged in fire, resilient, sharp, and unafraid. But today, even she felt the familiar twinge of unease that whispered, "This mission will change everything." Her unit, a tight-knit team of seasoned soldiers and fresh recruits, prepared to move into the heart of enemy territory. Intelligence had confirmed a heavily armed rogue faction had seized a critical supply route, threatening both civilians and allied forces. Their mission? Infiltrate, neutralize, and survive. But as Maya surveyed the horizon, she understood the truth. Survival would be anything but guaranteed. The young recruits nervously adjusted their gear, wide-eyed and tense. Maya offered a steadying glance. "Stick together. Watch each other's backs," she instructed, her voice calm but firm. She knew panic could spread faster than gunfire, and if fear took hold, this mission would be over before it even began. By mid-morning, the convoy moved out. Maya rode in the lead vehicle, scanning the landscape with a hawk-like intensity. Her eyes flicked over every ridge, every dune, every shadow. Something felt off. The desert held its breath, and the faint signs, a flock of birds frozen mid-flight, sand disturbed in unnatural patterns, set her instincts screaming. And then it happened. A hail of bullets erupted from the high ground. Explosions tore through the convoy, throwing smoke, sand, and chaos into the air. Maya dove behind the wheel of the disabled vehicle, rifle snapping into position. Her team scattered under fire, ducking behind the wreckage of their own transport. Radio chatter became a static scream. Orders were shouted, but few could hear them over the roar of gunfire. Maya's mind went into overdrive. The enemy was well prepared, coordinating attacks with terrifying precision. Her team was pinned, and their numbers dwindling by the second. But she didn't falter. With a fluid grace born of years of training, she moved from cover to cover, picking off enemy combatants one by one. Her breath was steady, her aim unerring. Each pull of the trigger was a life-or-death gamble, and Maya played it like a master. Amid the chaos, a massive explosion shook the battlefield. The lead vehicle was obliterated, sending a shockwave that knocked Maya off her feet. Dust choked her lungs, but she pressed on. Every instinct screamed, "Move forward," and forward she went, toward the faint cries of civilians trapped in a crumbling building near the edge of the battlefield. Inside, terrified faces turned toward her, women clutching children, elders frozen in shock. "Follow me," she commanded. Her tone left no room for hesitation. She led them through the maze of destroyed vehicles and debris, returning fire at the advancing enemy whenever they dared to close in. Every step was calculated, every decision could be her last. By late afternoon, Maya had achieved the impossible. She guided the civilians to safety, neutralized enemy positions threatening the retreating soldiers, and created a path for her unit to regroup. Exhaustion clawed at her body, but her mind remained razor-sharp. She crouched behind a destroyed wall, scanning the horizon. The sun was dipping below the dunes, painting the desert in blood red and gold, and the shadows of the enemy were still looming. Maya's radio crackled to life. Sergeant Ramirez's voice was tense. "Maya, status report." "I've got civilians safe. Key positions secured," she replied, keeping her voice low. "But the enemy is regrouping. We need a plan for the night. They'll come at us again." Silence followed. Even Ramirez knew the stakes were impossibly high. Maya had become the linchpin, the only anchor holding their mission together. Her team's survival depended on her next moves. Night fell, and the desert transformed into a predator's playground. Every shadow could conceal a threat. Maya set up a makeshift perimeter, using the remnants of the destroyed vehicles as cover. She checked her ammo, rations, and medical supplies, knowing each was precious. Every decision now carried the weight of life or death. As darkness deepened, she reflected briefly on how far she had come, from grueling exercises at Fort Bragg to covert operations overseas. Maya had faced impossible odds before, but never like this. The enemy was relentless, and she was on the front lines. But for the first time in her life, she didn't feel fear. She felt purpose, a clarity that coursed through her veins stronger than adrenaline. Then a faint sound carried on the wind, a whisper of movement, almost imperceptible. Maya's hand went to her rifle instinctively. She knew what it meant. The enemy is closing in, surrounding her position, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She tightened her grip, eyes scanning the terrain. Every instinct screamed, "Prepare." Every muscle tensed in anticipation. She crouched behind cover, rifle raised, calculating, waiting. The civilians were safe for now, but the battle was far from over. Maya understood something crucial. Tonight, the difference between life and death would not be decided by numbers or firepower. It would be decided by courage, by focus, and by the unyielding will to survive. Hours passed, each one stretching like a lifetime. The desert was eerily quiet, except for the occasional crack of distant gunfire and the whisper of wind over the dunes. Maya remained vigilant, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement, ready to strike, ready to fight. She moved silently, a shadow among shadows, a lone warrior standing firm against an enemy that outnumbered her many times over. And then she smiled, a brief, almost imperceptible expression, not of victory yet, but of resolve. She had survived this far, saved lives, and struck fear into the enemy. The night was long, the danger immense, but Maya knew one thing: as long as she stood, hope remained. Because in the heart of the battlefield, with explosions echoing behind her and darkness pressing in on all sides, Maya Thompson had become a force of nature, unstoppable, unbreakable, and unwilling to surrender. The sun had set, but her fight was just beginning. Night had swallowed the desert whole, and with it came a darkness thick enough to hide death itself. Corporal Maya Thompson crouched behind the wreckage of a burning supply truck, her rifle tight against her shoulder, eyes scanning every shadow. The civilians she had rescued earlier were now secured at a temporary safe zone, but the mission was far from over. Her team had been forced back after the ambush, scattered and vulnerable. Maya's breathing was steady, measured, but her mind raced. Every second, every movement could be the difference between life and death. From the ridge above, faint silhouettes shifted, enemy patrols testing the perimeter, probing for weaknesses. She had expected a frontal assault, but this was something else, coordinated, patient, and deadly. She peered through her scope, spotting a group of enemy soldiers moving in a wedge formation. Her fingers tightened around the trigger. She knew she couldn't take them all head-on. She needed strategy. She scanned the battlefield and spotted what could be her advantage, a narrow path between two dunes, partially obscured by debris. A plan formed. Maya would lure them into a trap, using the terrain and what little cover remained to her advantage. One by one, she picked off the scouts, precise shots echoing through the desert night. Each fallen enemy reduced the pressure on her scattered team, buying them time. But she knew she couldn't hold out forever. The first explosion came without warning, shaking the sand beneath her boots. Enemy artillery? She wasn't sure, but the sound of gunfire intensified. The assault had begun in earnest. From her vantage point, she could see the faint flicker of muzzle fire moving closer, closing in on her position. Maya moved with fluid precision, sliding from cover to cover. Her rifle barked in the darkness, taking out another pair of advancing soldiers. A faint whistle of a bullet near her ear reminded her that death was never far away. She rolled behind a collapsed wall, checking her ammo, her mind running through contingencies. Then she heard it, a cry from behind her, sharp and pained. She spun, rifle ready, and saw Private Jenkins, one of the younger recruits, hit and sprawled in the sand. Without hesitation, Maya sprinted across the open space, bullets grazing the earth around her. She reached him, dragging him to cover, her hands moving quickly to apply a tourniquet. "We're not done yet," she whispered, her voice firm. "You hold on." Jenkins nodded weakly, fear and trust mixed in his eyes. Around them, the enemy tightened the noose. Maya realized that conventional retreat wasn't an option. They were surrounded on all sides. The only way out was to fight her way through, and that meant taking risks that could easily be fatal. She made a split-second decision. Using a combination of smoke grenades and calculated bursts of fire, she created a diversion. Enemy soldiers turned toward the smoke, giving Maya and Jenkins just enough cover to dash to the next line of defense, a small ridge overlooking the battlefield. From this higher ground, she had a clearer view of the enemy formations. They were organized, methodical, and ruthless. Her heart pounded, but fear did not touch her. Every muscle, every nerve, every thought was honed to a single purpose: survive and protect those who could not protect themselves. Hours bled into one another. Maya's movements were silent, almost ghost-like, as she picked off enemies with lethal precision. She set traps using the remnants of the battlefield, tripwires connected to grenades, improvised barriers, and deadfall traps designed to slow the enemy's advance. She was alone, but the desert itself seemed to bend to her will, every shadow and ridge becoming a tool in her fight. Amid the chaos, she caught sight of a familiar figure, Sergeant Ramirez, moving cautiously through the darkness. Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. He was injured, bleeding from a shoulder wound, and exhaustion was etched into every line of his face. "Maya, we can't hold much longer," he muttered, voice strained. "We need extraction." "No," she said firmly, "we finish this. Tonight we survive and we make them pay for every life they threaten." Her voice carried a weight of command that left no room for argument. Ramirez nodded, understanding that surrender was not an option with Maya in charge. Together, they set up a makeshift defensive perimeter. The enemy was closing in, but Maya's tactical brilliance shone through. She positioned the injured and fatigued soldiers in protected zones, assigned firing positions, and coordinated suppressive fire. Every movement, every decision was calculated to maximize survival and inflict maximum damage on the enemy. Then came the first wave. The attackers surged over the dunes, shouting, guns blazing. Maya and Ramirez unleashed a hail of bullets, taking them down one by one. Explosions ripped through the sand, sending plumes of fire and debris into the night sky. Maya's senses were heightened to an almost supernatural level. She could feel the bullets, anticipate the moves, and strike with lethal accuracy. But the enemy kept coming. Another wave emerged from a different flank, forcing Maya to split her attention. She fired, ducked, rolled, and advanced, a whirlwind of motion and determination. Every soldier she had trained with, every lesson learned in countless exercises, came alive in her mind. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her team, for the civilians she had saved, for survival itself. Amid the chaos, she caught sight of a young recruit crying out, trapped under rubble. Without hesitation, Maya dove into the line of fire, hoisting the soldier free just as a bullet tore through the sand, inches from her shoulder. Pain shot through her body, but she ignored it, focused solely on getting the soldier to safety. By the time the enemy realized the intensity of the resistance, Maya had already turned the tide. Her traps had slowed them, her sharpshooting had thinned their ranks, and her leadership had rallied the scattered soldiers into a cohesive defensive unit. Yet, even as victory seemed within reach, Maya knew better. This was a temporary reprieve. The enemy was ruthless and determined, and with the night still young, more dangers lurked in the shadows. Maya crouched behind cover, surveying the battlefield. Blood, sweat, and sand coated her body, but her eyes burned with resolve. She was exhausted, injured, and alone in many ways, but she had survived every impossible challenge so far, and she would survive this night too, no matter the cost. Because Maya Thompson had become more than a soldier. She had become a force, unyielding, unstoppable, and ready to face impossible odds. And as the distant sounds of enemy movement echoed across the desert, she whispered to herself, "This is far from over, and I'm not done yet." The first light of dawn barely crept over the horizon, painting the desert in pale gold. But for Corporal Maya Thompson, there was no relief in the morning. Night had been relentless, a harrowing test of endurance and survival, and now the enemy was regrouping, stronger and more determined than ever. Her unit was battered, her team exhausted, and the battlefield was a jagged scar of destruction. Yet Maya's resolve had not wavered. She crouched behind a shattered wall, surveying the chaos. Smoke still lingered in the air, mingling with the acrid scent of gunpowder. Around her, the injured struggled to regain composure, while others cleaned and reloaded their weapons with trembling hands. Every soldier looked to her for guidance because she had become the anchor in the storm, the one person capable of holding the line against overwhelming odds. The enemy's advance came swiftly. From the dunes, a wave of combatants poured forward, their battle cries piercing the morning air. Maya assessed the situation with lightning speed. There was no room for hesitation. Every second counted. She adjusted her position, took a deep breath, and opened fire. Her rifle barked sharply, taking down 2 enemy soldiers in an instant. Every shot was precise, each movement deliberate. Her team formed a defensive perimeter, but they were still outnumbered nearly 3-1. Maya knew the key to survival was to control the battlefield, to make every inch of desert work for them. She set up improvised barricades, used sand and debris as cover, and positioned her team to maximize their firing angles. Then she did something bold. She created a kill zone, funneling the enemy into a narrow stretch between 2 ridges, forcing them to advance through her line of fire. The first wave hit hard. Bullets tore through sand and stone, and explosions rocked the battlefield. Maya moved like a phantom, striking from cover, ducking and rolling to avoid the hail of fire. She was everywhere at once, an unstoppable force of courage and precision. But victory was far from certain. From the ridge above, enemy snipers began to pick off her team, and Maya realized the danger was escalating. She had to act fast. With a flash grenade in hand, she sprinted across the open ground, drawing sniper fire and creating a diversion. Her movements were fluid, almost superhuman, as she reached a fallen comrade, hoisted him to safety, and fired in all directions. Minutes stretched like hours. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, every nerve screaming, yet she pushed past pain, fatigue, and fear. She thought of the civilians she had saved, of her team relying on her, of everything she had trained for. Failure was not an option. Then, amidst the chaos, she caught sight of an enemy commander coordinating the attack. Precision and ruthlessness radiated from him, and Maya knew this was the moment that could turn the tide. She signaled to Ramirez, who nodded, understanding her intent. Together, they orchestrated a flanking maneuver, drawing a portion of the enemy into Maya's kill zone. The firefight intensified. Bullets whizzed past, explosions erupted, and the desert became a storm of fire and sand. Maya's focus narrowed to a single point, eliminating the commander. With a combination of stealth, agility, and courage, she moved across exposed terrain, her rifle silent but deadly. Every heartbeat brought her closer to her target, every movement calculated to avoid detection. Finally, she was within range. The commander's back was exposed. One shot, and it would be over. Maya's finger tightened on the trigger. She exhaled slowly, aiming, calculating wind, distance, and timing. The shot rang out, precise, clean, decisive. The enemy commander fell, and with him, the coordination of the assault began to crumble. The remaining forces faltered, confusion rippling through their ranks. Maya seized the moment, rallying her team. "Push forward! Now's our chance!" she shouted. Together, they pressed the attack, driving the enemy back, reclaiming territory inch by inch. But victory came at a cost. Maya had been grazed by a bullet, blood streaking her arm, her energy drained from hours of relentless combat. Pain flared, but she ignored it, focusing on the task at hand. Around her, soldiers fought valiantly, inspired by her courage and determination. Her presence was a beacon in the chaos, a symbol that surrender was never an option. As the sun climbed higher, the battlefield fell eerily quiet. The enemy had retreated, leaving destruction in their wake. Maya stood among the ruins, surveying the aftermath. Burned vehicles, sand scorched by explosions, and the exhausted faces of her team. Every life saved, every enemy neutralized, was a testament to her indomitable spirit. She sank to her knees, exhausted, wounded, but alive. Ramirez approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it, Maya. Against all odds, you did it." Maya's eyes scanned the horizon. The desert was silent now, a canvas of victory painted with sacrifice and courage. Her body ached, her vision blurred, but her heart was steady. She had stood against impossible odds and emerged victorious. In that moment, she understood something profound. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was the will to act in spite of it. And as long as she stood, no odds were truly impossible. Yet, even as she rested, a shadow of awareness lingered. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Somewhere beyond the dunes, threats still lurked, waiting for the next opportunity. Maya knew this was only a pause, a momentary calm before the storm would inevitably return. But for now, she allowed herself a fleeting sense of triumph. Against overwhelming numbers, against fire, smoke, and chaos, she had endured, she had led, she had survived. And in doing so, she had become more than a soldier. She had become a legend in her own right, a force of nature who refused to yield. As the sun rose fully over the battlefield, painting her silhouette in gold, Maya Thompson stood tall, rifle in hand, ready for whatever came next. She had fought against impossible odds and survived, and she would do it again, because that was who she was, and this battlefield, this war, had only just begun to test her. The battlefield lay quiet under the pale morning sun, but the silence was deceptive. Corporal Maya Thompson crouched behind the remnants of a destroyed supply truck, surveying the desert that had become both her prison and her proving ground. The enemy had retreated for now, but she knew this was temporary. Their forces were scattered, regrouping, planning another strike. And this time, she had to ensure that neither her team nor the civilians they protected would face them unprepared. Her body ached from countless wounds, scrapes, burns, and bullet grazes, but adrenaline kept her moving. Every breath reminded her of the stakes. She was alone at the forefront of survival, a one-woman army who had become the anchor of her team's hope. "Corporal Thompson!" Ramirez's voice called from behind a ridge. The sergeant had survived the brutal assault, though fatigue and pain were etched into his face. "We need a plan. They'll strike again, and it won't be long." Maya's mind raced. The last 48 hours had been a relentless storm of gunfire, explosions, and split-second decisions. But she had learned one crucial lesson. The battlefield could be turned in one brilliant, unexpected move. She gestured toward the narrow canyon ahead, a natural funnel where enemy forces would be forced to converge. "This is it," she said, determination in her voice. "We draw them in here. They'll come thinking they have the advantage, but we'll turn this canyon into a trap. Every inch will work for us." Her team, battered but loyal, nodded. They had fought alongside her through impossible odds, and even now the spark of trust burned bright in their eyes. Maya assigned positions with precision, sharpshooters at elevated points, soldiers with explosives in hidden crevices, and a secondary line of defense ready to respond. Every detail was critical. The enemy could not break them here. Hours passed. The desert sun climbed, scorching the sand and creating mirages that danced like illusions on the horizon. Maya remained vigilant, scanning, anticipating, waiting. Then, faint dust clouds appeared in the distance. The enemy was advancing, confident, unaware of the deadly welcome awaiting them. When they entered the canyon, the trap was sprung. Explosions ripped through the air as sand and debris erupted around them, and Maya's sharpshooters picked off key targets with deadly accuracy. The enemy faltered, confusion spreading through their ranks. Maya moved fluidly through the chaos, firing, coordinating, and pushing forward with relentless energy. Yet even as the first wave fell, a second, larger force approached from the rear. Maya's heart hammered, not from fear, but from pure focus. She understood that victory would demand the last ounce of her strength and every strategic move she could make. "Split and flank! Use the terrain! Keep them in the canyon!" Her team obeyed, moving like extensions of her own instincts. Explosions and gunfire echoed, turning the desert into a storm of sound and chaos. Maya ducked behind cover, exchanging fire with enemy soldiers attempting to escape the funnel. Each shot was calculated, every move mattered. She had become both tactician and warrior, orchestrating destruction with precision. Amid the fight, she noticed an enemy sniper attempting to take aim from a ridge. Without hesitation, she sprinted across open sand, using the smoke of a nearby explosion as cover. A single precise shot took him down, and she rolled behind cover just as bullets tore through the air where she had been moments before. Pain shot through her body from a previous wound, but she ignored it. This was no time to falter. Hours of relentless combat pushed Maya to her limits. She was exhausted, bleeding, and every muscle screamed in protest, yet she pressed on. Around her, the enemy was collapsing under the precision and coordination she had orchestrated. Her team, inspired by her courage, fought with renewed vigor, each soldier finding strength in her example. Finally, the last of the enemy forces broke. Some fled, others surrendered, and the remainder lay incapacitated in the canyon. Maya sank to her knees, rifle resting on her shoulder, and allowed herself a moment to breathe. She had done it. Against overwhelming odds, she had led her team to victory. But the moment was more than just a military triumph. It was deeply personal. She looked around at the survivors. Her team, bruised but alive. Civilians, shaken but safe. Every life saved, every soldier protected, every enemy neutralized was a testament to courage, resilience, and the refusal to yield. Ramirez approached, placing his shoulder on Maya's. "You did it, Maya. Against impossible odds, you did it." His voice carried respect, relief, and awe. Maya's gaze drifted toward the horizon. The desert, once a place of relentless threat, now shimmered with the first rays of sunlight, a symbol of resilience and hope. She thought of the lives she had protected, the sacrifices made, and the battles fought, not just on this day, but throughout her career. Every challenge had led to this moment. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered to her team, voice hoarse but steady. They nodded, smiles mixed with exhaustion and relief, understanding that their survival had been guided by her unwavering determination. As the sun rose fully, illuminating the scars of battle across the desert, Maya stood tall. Her body was battered, but her spirit was unbroken. She had faced impossible odds, survived ambushes, and led her team to victory when hope seemed lost. She had become more than a soldier. She had become a legend. The battlefield behind her was a silent monument to courage, resilience, and sacrifice. Maya knew the war would continue. There would always be more threats, more challenges, but she had proven something vital. With courage, strategy, and unyielding willpower, even the impossible could be overcome. With a final glance at the desert, Maya turned to her team. "We live to fight another day," she said, voice firm but gentle. Her rifle slung over her shoulder, armor scorched and battle-worn, Maya Thompson walked away from the battlefield not just as a soldier, but as a symbol of courage against impossible odds. Her story would echo across the desert, across the ranks, and in the hearts of those she had saved, a testament to what one determined soul could achieve in the face of overwhelming adversity. The sun blazed overhead, casting long shadows behind her. The battle was over, but the legend had just begun.